My first session as co-chair of Ways and Means, my years on this budget writing committee made it easy to see that finding a path to stabilize our budget wasn't going to be easy. It would be the biggest challenge I've had as a lawmaker. When Senator Devlin, the budget co-chair for the Senate, and I started our work many months ago, we didn't know whether we would have some or any additional revenue to balance the budget. So we developed what you all understood as our existing resources budget. It showed roughly—
Excuse me, Representative. Colleagues, co-chairs worked really hard this session. Could you just give her a couple minutes for her final statement? Thank you.
It showed roughly how each program area would be funded, given only the resources available under current law. We assumed no new revenue and that all expiring tax credits would indeed expire. This was a difficult starting place for all of our budget subcommittees. It was painful, but we achieved several important objectives by beginning the process this way. First, it ensured that we could fulfill our constitutional obligation to balance the budget, and we did. 3 other states had at least a partial shutdown on July 1st because they hadn't been able to do that. Second, it allowed us to scrutinize budgets for savings in order to direct funds to the highest priorities. This budget environment also forced us to have difficult conversations about the structural issues underlying our perennial budget challenges. Senator Devlin and I adopted some common sense budgeting principles as part of our broader effort to bend the state's long-term cost curve. For the most part, that is, with very few exceptions, we favored limiting the number of task forces that needed to be funded. We favored funding existing programs that have proven outcomes over new ideas that were untested, unless the new program would save money or avoid larger costs or replace a less effective program. We worked closely with every subcommittee to develop prioritized lists of spending reductions. We made across the board and then additional selective cuts that general category supplies and services, the money allocated for state staff and agency expenses. We have cut over 330 positions that were vacant in favor of supporting areas more directly related to helping people. New this biennium is the marijuana tax revenue distributed according to voter-adopted ballot measure, 40% to education, 20% to mental health, alcoholism and drug services, 20% to local government, 15% to the state police, and 5% to the Oregon Health Authority. In the end, thanks to a positive revenue forecast, a successful provider tax package to fund our Medicaid population, and several major cost containment measures, we were able to avoid the worst cuts to our schools and critical services, and we did balance this state's budget. We wrestled with the difficult choices built into our current resources, and I would argue that we succeeded in both streamlining government services and prioritizing these budgets to reflect Oregon's values. So now, the pony. You all know this means that this is the Ways and Means statement. Senate Bill 5529 allocates and transfers lottery funds and funds from the criminal fine account and Oregon marijuana account to finance expenditures approved in the budget. Lottery funds in this bill are allocated to support the state school fund and pay debt service on lottery revenue bonds. Other lottery allocations provide support to the Oregon Business Development Department, to counties for economic development programs and county fairs, to public universities for intercollegiate athletics, academic scholarships and the outdoor school program, to the Oregon Health Authority for gambling addiction prevention and treatment programs, and to the Governor's Office for Regional Solutions program staff. Allocations of ballot measure 96 lottery funds dedicated to Veterans Services are allocated from the Veterans Services Fund for the first time. Measure 96 funds are allocated to the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Housing and Community Services for veterans programs. The bill also allocates $77 million from the criminal fine account for agency and county programs and $162 million of marijuana tax revenue to the state school fund, mental health, alcoholism, and drug abuse prevention and treatment, and the state police. The Joint Committee on Ways and Means recommends approval of Senate Bill 5529 as amended.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion?